Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am yet again Bree Castellini, Seed&Spark's Film Community Manager. We'd first like to start off by acknowledging the land that we are all on right now is occupied territory. Please check the YouTube comments, the live comments feed, and eventually the video description for a link to a First Nations COVID relief fund and an amazing app that will tell you exactly whose land you are currently watching from. And if you're not as familiar with Seed&Spark, we are a platform built to support creators by providing tools for wherever you are in your creative journey, whether that's crowdfunding and education to creative distribution approaches. And today I am so excited to be joined to talk about high quality, low budget, remote production hacks by the co-creators of Binge. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves in just a moment. So welcome, Binge. Hello.
Hi.
Can you guys introduce yourselves really quickly?
Angela, you go first.
Sure. I'm Angela Gullner, she, her, hers. Yeah, I'm the co-creator and star of Binge, which we'll chat a little bit more about, but it's an independent ongoing production that we started 20,000 years ago and is still continuing to this day, that I created with my good friend Yuri here.
Yeah, so I'm Yuri Baranovsky. I directed Binge and I co-created it with Angela. And I also run a production company called Happy Little Guillotine Studios, HLG Studios, who has been creating digital content since 2006. And we've been doing Binge for, as Angela said, 20,000 years, but it's one of my favorite projects and something we keep coming back to because I feel like tied to it forever and ever.
Forever.
So if you can remember 20,000 years ago, I'd love for you guys to tell us a little bit about the story of Binge, how it started, what has been going on, and then maybe briefly what's been going on more recently.
Yeah, so I think it was probably in all reality about like 8 years ago now. I had just gotten out of treatment for my eating disorder and was getting sort of frustrated as an actor, just trying to do the acting path. And Yuri and I had worked together a couple of different times, and I really loved his writing, and I loved the production company HLG Studios, and the whole team there were fantastic. And I sort of asked him if he could teach me how to write, and he ended up liking the idea so much that we started to just write and work on it together.
Yeah, Angela had this, her story, which is Binge essentially, with some changes, of course, but it was so raw and funny the way she was telling it. I had never heard an eating disorder story told in that way. So I was like, can I write it with you? Also, it should be noted that once we kind of broke down the story, Angela wrote it in one day. It wasn't the script that we ended up shooting, but it was like, she was like that night. She's like, okay, so I'm done. Jesus Christ.
I got really excited.
Can you give us a quick log line for it for those of us who may not be familiar?
Sure. Angela, go ahead.
Yeah,
you have a good log line?
Let me try and form this kind of on the spot, even though we worked a bunch of time. Basically, it's when Angela Mills drunkenly enrolls herself in eating disorder treatment, she throws her life and the lives of all of those around her into disarray.
Right. So Angela was in a... That was good. Good memory. Angela was in a partial hospitalization clinic for bulimia for 4 months. Was it 4 months?
Something like that.
And she enrolled. Like the best part of the story is that the way she enrolled herself is by drunk dialing clinics and forgetting
like a grown up. Yeah.
And then they would call her and she'd be like, "Who is this? Who's calling?
Why are you so obsessed with me?"
And so that was the kind of the beginning of her treatment and her, eventual journey through it all.
And so we started writing together and realized we work really nicely together, and we wrote the script, and we got really good feedback on it. But this was like 8 years ago.
This is 1973 when we wrote this.
1973, and it's been really interesting because as frustrating and as far as we have to go in terms of equity and inclusion and diversity and diverse voices, it feels like 8 years ago, things were totally, the feedback we kept getting was she's unlikable. A woman no one's going to watch her, because this was before Fleabag, or, before we got comfortable seeing women who had stronger opinions. And so we decided that when we got all this pushback from these different sort of executives and voices in the industry, we just sort of disagreed with it and decided to do a super, super low budget production with Yuri's production company. And we just made it ourselves.
We shot the pilot in 5 days, and then we were like, I think we even just shopped the pilot then around, or like we tried, and then people were like, I don't think this is going to help. So we were like, you know what? We feel like it's good. We're going to just release it on YouTube. And it wasn't just release it, like we had a plan-ish. But we didn't have
a plan-ish. Mm-hmm.
We had a plan-ish, but HLG had like 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and like we didn't have an infrastructure for that. Like we're not, that's not really what we do. We make the thing, and then whoever hires us puts it out. So Angela emailed like 1 million people for press, and we had a good launch. And then it sort of blew up for us. It has over 1 million views, comments continuing now 2-3 years later, like constantly. So it was a big success.
It was a big success. It's just been an interesting journey with it, because we made it, and we just, we had trouble just like getting through the door to be able to like pitch it to a proper TV network. Like we had trouble getting that door to open for us. And so we decided to do a crowdfunding campaign. And that was exhausting and successful.
Yeah, we tried to raise 30,000 to do more content, and we raised 45,000. So that was super cool.
Yeah.
And then
always imagined as a TV show, or was that like the original? Okay.
Yeah,
that was our original goal, like a half-hour dramedy.
And so thanks to that, so the success of that and the pilot and all sort of everything at once, we got a bunch of meetings, and then signed a deal with MGM to develop it for TV. And like the people at MGM were amazing. Our executive was amazing. Like the thing that we developed with them was really awesome. We had a showrunner that we loved. And then we pitched it this last September to a bunch of networks and places like that. And despite the meetings going very well, I think we made a lot of good connections. They still, it's easier to say no than yes. And I think despite everything and the changing of the industry, you can still have 40 shows about dudes who are alcoholics, but we still get comments like, oh no, we already have a show with one episode where we deal with, eating disorders. So like this feels like too much. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That does feel like a lot of eating disorder content.
We also hit the pitching market right as a bunch of the streamers were prepping their slates for their launch. Yeah. And so everyone's stacking their roster with massive names and massive budgets. I watched the pilot of Brave New World the other day, and I was like, oh, we could have made the entire season of Binge for like the budget of like 3 of these scenes.
right. Yeah.
But they're all trying to compete for audiences. So
and that was actually something that someone even told us very honestly, which we appreciated. A network was like, you know what, if you guys came to us in a year, like this would have been perfect. But right now we're just trying to compete, so we're getting like the biggest shows. So who knows?
So really quickly, there's a question from comments that I want to address before we move on to what you guys have been currently doing, which is more the topic of this conversation. But obviously the story of Binge has always been inspiring. I remember interviewing you guys back in the day. And Angela, you mentioned that by the end of your press blitz, you were in arm braces from emailing so many people. So we have a question from HL Tyler, who asks, did you email direct contacts you had in the press or a broader reach? So what was your plan-ish that you guys mentioned to kind of get the word out?
I just spent, I think it was 4 weeks emailing every contact I could find on the
Remember
internet.
How I said she wrote a script in one day? Like Angela, once set to the right task, Angela is.
I know, I'm very. But, what they say about eating disorders is that they're superpowers that are channeled in an unhealthy direction. So I just took that eating disorder and I applied it to my creative work now. So it's a little more.
And very
healthy.
Specifically, the plan-ish was to we wanted to release. I believe it was right after Thanksgiving, right? It was like the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because Angela was saying like it's a really hard time for people specifically, so it was like a nice thing to kind of show then. And then we had the date and the pilot done like early November, so everyone we contacted was like, here's the pilot, check it out. We're launching on this day. If you're interested in writing about it, could you write about it on that day? So when it launched, we had like 5 or 8 or 10 articles launch at the same time. So it really started driving traffic that way. And then we had a few more, sort of press begets more press, right? So then other people contacted us for more press, so that we had like a week or two of sort of constant articles coming out. And then I don't honestly know what happened. We triggered the YouTube
algorithm thing somehow.
Still don't know exactly how to do that.
Yeah.
We had a lot of like eating disorder communities, like, because they don't have content like this, really like go, like it was linked everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, at first it had modestly, it was like a pretty good launch. Like it was like a 20,000 views, and we were like, this is great. Like this is what we wanted. It seemed like a lot for having no real infrastructure. But then by like Christmas, it was jumping like 40,000 views a day, an hour. Like it was just like flying up like crazy. So
yeah.
Did you guys have specific contacts that you were going for, or were they mostly cold emails? What was the strategy around that?
It was almost entirely cold emailing, but I really targeted folks who wrote about, like, there were kind of like a couple of different versions of the pitch. It would be like women in the industry, or anti-diet, recovery community, wellness and health. And then, there was also a bit of like a feminist angle too. And then, and then Yuri did some work on his own too, that I would like to honor, Yuri.
We had,
about HLG, right? And the specifics of like what HLG is able to produce on a really tight budget.
Right. We have some context so that I knew personally from past experiences, but not like a whole lot. I feel like people move around like crazy. So I feel like Tube Filter is an easy one that, like, I'm good friends with those guys. And but yeah, I think like IndieWire, but IndieWire I think was you too. Like I knew someone at IndieWire.
Yeah, that was a blind. Yeah. We, and I think part of it is, timing and what's in the news, and the election had just happened. And I think there was this collective trauma that everyone wanted to kind of help each other out and like listen to each other. So I think in a way that's
a good point.
That sort of helped unite, especially women got a lot of really powerful responses from female journalists. And,
I think people were feeling hopeless, and this was like, hey, do you want to promote something that, has a little bit of hope? And people were like, okay, that was, so you're right. I never actually connected those two, but I sort of blocked those 4 months out.
No, that makes sense. And if anyone's curious about more like specific concrete advice on figuring out who like the points of interest or what the points of interest are for your work, our previous Lunch&Learn 2 weeks ago was about audience building for creatives, which touches on a lot of stuff that Yuri and Angela just mentioned, and also our building an email list Lunch&Learn from way back in the day, like 3 months ago, back in the day when everything was different. That's talking specifically about crowdfunding supporters, but has a lot of one-to-one comparisons to press contacts. So definitely go check those previous resources out if you are curious. So
that was one thing that I wish we did plan for. I don't think we ever expected the success that it would have. And I think we didn't have the infrastructure of like gathering emails. Yeah. And so it was like, we tried, but it was a little late when we started doing it. Like, I think if we had like social media account ready and, if we were just like really on it, I think we could have built out our social media presence a bit more. But how do you plan for going viral?
Learn.
Like it's just you don't. Yeah.
You live and learn.
Yeah.
So speaking of things that you've learned since then, so recently you actually made some new online exclusive content for Binge set in the world. Was there ever like a copyright issue, or since all of the networks passed, the copyright went back to you guys? What was the situation there?
Yes, technically after 6 months, our contract with MGM went away, though they were also like, we're in a way, we have like a relationship with them still, where like, if we're like, hey, there's a new outlet to pitch, they will gladly pitch it. And they by no means want to stand in the way of the show. So they're wonderful. I think even if it was within those 6 months, they would have been like, go make it. But
so we just, Yuri really spearheaded it. We just got this sense at the beginning of the pandemic that our audience was really struggling, and seeing lots of posts on social media just about like how the rhetoric around the quarantine 15 and all of these like workout accounts and being stuck at home with food all day. It just all of a sudden there felt like there was a big mood change with our audience, and we were sort of like, we should just put a little something out as like a sort of piece, like an offering of love. And then that became, well, let's do a couple little things. And then that became 120 minutes worth of content that we made.
Yeah, so the new miniseries started canonically as the stay-at-home orders started. But at what point during your guys' quarantine did you actually start, like, in earnest working on the 3-episode miniseries?
It was pretty quick,
like
right? I feel like
April,
it was April that we started. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think it was like let's say 2 or 3 weeks in, we were like, let's make something small, and then I think Angela was fiddling with the writing and was like, I feel like maybe it's like a few short episodes or whatever, like 2-3 minute, and then I started writing and I was like, maybe it's 23 pages an episode. And then the last episode's like 40 pages, and I'm like,
we essentially made a movie.
yeah.
You guys did.
So can you tell us the story of that? Like what is the miniseries about? What does it cover?
It basically sort of picks up generally after the pilot, but with maybe a little bit of time. And we look at Angela and Kate, her best friend, and basically just it's quite simple, just like how their lives changed with the pandemic. Like, it's pretty simple. I mean, there are a couple of little plot points, like Angela gets trapped inside with her one-night stand, so there's a little drama there, and there's
it follows the 3 stages of the 5 stages of grief as well. Mm-hmm. So the first one is denial, and then
the second one is like anger.
Yeah. And then there's the third
depression.
one.
It's like,
I knew this 2 months ago.
Yeah, bargaining, acceptance, sort of gradually moving toward that area.
Acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the pre-production process like on a practical level? Like, what were the first things you guys knew you needed to figure out before this was going to be possible?
Well, it was how to shoot it.
Yeah.
I think my impulse is to make everything pretty. And then it was like right away, I think some of the actors were maybe more comfortable. Some of the actors were less comfortable about any kind of like interaction with anyone. So it was like, okay, we're just not going to do that. And so then it was like, well, how do we shoot this in an interesting way? And I think it always started from the script of like, let's not make this as if like, this would have looked better, but it's the pandemic. So this is what we're making. So like the idea was to make this specifically catered to this world and to shoot it catered to this world. So the first thing was to write a script and to be like, how do we cleverly shoot this and make it interesting? Mm-hmm. What are all the different ways that we could show off?
And we also didn't want it to be just Zoom calls and talking heads, just because I think at that point in the pandemic, we were all like so sick of sitting on Zoom, and we just wanted more movement. We wanted it to feel a little more alive than that.
Right. Like every episode we wrote, it was like, well, how do we tell this scene in a way that's not, and we did a fair amount of Zoom calls, but we still, and I think every episode we kind of started experimenting more and more. The end of the second one is particularly bizarre. But we did a lot of tricks with the second one, or the third one as well.
Can you run the audience
through, if you can remember, all of the different styles of largely found footage that you used to kind of put the episodes together? So obviously there were Zoom calls. Angela's one night stand had his YouTube channel that he started.
So wholesome. Love
that. Yeah. What do you remember the other ones?
So one big thing we did stylistically, and something we discovered in the first episode took us the longest because we were not sure what it was yet, and we kept fiddling with the style.
And
reshooting it. Yeah, we're like, oh, this scene doesn't work. Let's reshoot again. We have these interstitials that we call them interstitials, where pretty much after every scene we see the world shot by our DP Justin, who went out and shot this beautiful footage, sort of to showcase the outside world is still, it's empty and desolate, but still beautiful. And so that was another way of telling the story, is just like the old way, just shooting these beautiful shots of LA. We had, and in the first episode, we did a lot of little videos of Angela checking herself out in the mirror and doing all these, all these symptoms of eating disorder things. One of my favorite things we did was in the second episode, one of her phone falls behind the bed and it's on. And so we see a bunch of stuff happen, just she can't find it. So just lost under her bed. There's that.
From the perspective of the phone.
Basically the entire episode.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Much of it. Yeah. What else, Angela? Yeah, it means the Zoom call.
We use like the Marco Polo app as a convention for leaving some messages to Kate.
Yep.
And that was kind of those were
and
sort of our
end,
main.
And our very ending is shot like a movie.
And that was a
drone for a lot of it, and then we were at that point. It was like 3 months into the pandemic, and we were like, okay, we know how to do this safely. So we shot a few of it, just like, socially distant, but in the same outside area.
Yeah, because
the final bit was you and Kate were both in cars, so you were never out in the world interacting with one another.
That's right.
And we actually shot those at different times. We weren't together when we shot that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So they shot it with Donnie first, and then with me second. So there were very few of us there, and all masked and doing all of that stuff.
Movie magic.
Movie magic. But like the hardest thing was like I had to buy a new computer and a new iPhone because like my phone didn't have enough storage, and I ended up needing 2 different phones so I could have audio on one and camera on the other, and we had to upgrade our Wi-Fi so it was like
the barrier to entry in the beginning was tough, just like teaching everyone to how to film, essentially, like actors.
We all had to sort of and then zooming in with Justin the DP and him sort of being like, okay, can you move this light over here, can you move this over there? So we had to sort of like embrace it was in a lot of ways it was a lot faster than regular shooting, and in a lot of ways it was a lot more tedious. Because people I don't understand that. And so Justin was like having to teach me, no, you got to move it this way. Nope, you got to move it this way. So it's all of those little technical things
one of the hardest things and this is just testament to the actors, the way we ended up shooting it for quality wise. And I'm guessing that there's probably a better way, but we just, at the time, we were like, we wanted to make it, and we just sort of rushed into it. But is we essentially just shot, every Zoom call is like like they're just shooting a video of themselves, and they're calling the other actor on another phone.
I would essentially, so if I'm doing a scene with Yuri, I would have my cell phone kind of like sitting right, like I'd put it like right here behind my lens. And I see him in the foreground on the Zoom, and I'm pretending I'm seeing him in my camera. So I'm recording onto my actual camera and not using a Wi-Fi signal, because the first couple of times we shot it, it was like this footage just like was so bad. And
and so the headphones went into the other source, so like the headphones were the call essentially, so they could only really hear each other and like kind of see each other depending on where their video was. And we would rehearse obviously with them looking at each other a bunch, but I have like 3 scenes in it, but I personally hated it. It's just really hard. Like I need to react off of people's faces, but some of the best scenes, these are these like dramatic moments with Angela and Daniela, or Angela and Frodo, Ryan, and they're amazing. And it's like they're not even looking at each other's faces. It's a very impressive feat.
Yeah. So
we just got a question that I was about to ask about sound. So so was all of the sound recorded just from phones or from headphones into a phone? Was there anyone who'd used a mic, or do you want to keep it consistent?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, our sound guy, our post sound guy, who's like worked on Walking Dead and all these things, has had us do ADR before into our iPhones in a pinch. Like his thing is like, that microphone is actually very good. Especially if you're not making like a blockbuster movie, just regular conversation is quite good. We just have to make sure like we were in a quiet place, we weren't outside, But I even did a scene outside and it was fine. So there's one scene that the sound we had to ADR because the sound was bad.
Sure.
But
I didn't even know that.
Well, Mark's.
Oh, that's right. It was really windy. Yeah. I did.
Yeah, and that's going to be the case
even with like a boomstick. If it's windy outside, it's windy outside. What are you going to do?
That's right.
Yeah.
But I think the sound's actually pretty good. Like it turned out pretty well. We did have a post, like this guy I was talking about, did us a solid and just like did a sweep of all the sound and kind of made it sound uniform and nice. But generally, I think
generally iPhones. I mean, they do a lot. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, they do a lot.
Another web series that was coming out around the same time as you guys, maybe a little earlier or later, The Gay and Wondrous Life of Gallo. I think exclusively for that series, all of their sound was done with iPhones, just like upside down in actors' shirts.
I've heard that, and it works. Yeah.
Yeah, they do that with a lot of their sketches.
Yeah, yeah. That's why having two, I didn't trade in my phone. I kept my other phone. So I had one phone that I was using for sound and another one that I was using for video.
That's where actually the idea of having the idea of having her lose her phone behind her bed was because Angela was like, I have two phones now.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, that was half the series. We were like, okay, well, what do we have? You know, Angela's boyfriend is an actor. So we're like, all right, I had never seen him act. He seemed like he might be good, and
he had a face that was like, "You look kind of talented.
You look like you can say something on camera."
He like coaches actors and stuff, so I assumed he was, you know, he had some measure of skill. Yeah, and he's great, and he has a huge part in it. So.
Yeah, yeah. So it's lucky that he was good. If he was bad, I don't know what would he have done.
So for folks who want more low budget sound advice, at the end of our pitch video, Lunch and Learn a couple of weeks ago, we have a bunch of tips on low budget sound stuff. And it's things like making sure the distance from the actor is consistent and, you know, from between different actors are consistent, not one person being recorded from across the room and one right ahead, stuff like that. So if you're curious, definitely check out the pitch video, Lunch and Learn. I'm sorry to all of my behind the scenes people at Seed&Spark right now, because I keep mentioning things that I didn't say I was going to mention earlier. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. This will happen every time, and I can't do anything about it. Did anything surprise you guys about producing a project during this time? Was there anything that was like really cool or frustrating in a way that you weren't expecting?
So for me, I think one of the coolest sort of discoveries is that the story felt in some ways more real than it felt like. It felt like the pilot was, you know, a produced show, and this was like we actually got to see the character, like see these people. Like the pilot was the presenting to an audience, and this is like we somehow got to sneak into their phone and watch it. And there's something like very personal and real in these conversations that are like, I remember watching them, you know, just do the acting to some of them, and it was like I would forget to direct. I'd just be like watching, like it feels like you're just like there, and it was really powerful in a way that I didn't expect it to be. So that was a big surprise.
I think the most challenging part was just every time in the third episode, we have a series of conversations. Angela does the very cliched thing of calling all of her exes or her one night stands to sort of, I don't know, look for some sort of comfort. And we cast all of these amazing actors who we're friends with, but we had to coach each of them through the whole set. You know what I mean? Like so there was a barrier to entry every single time we taught someone our system.
Our favorite, the best thing that happened is there was a scene that Angela shot with the therapist, Ryan, and we shot it. It was like 3 hours of shooting, and we all loved it, etc. And then when he was supposed to upload it, he's like, I can't find the video. It's so weird. And he like called his friend who's like at Apple, all these things. So like 3 days, or like, I don't know why it would disappear.
Like, oh, we're supposed to release this episode. We need your footage.
Yeah. So 3 days later, he's like, I think we have to reshoot. And we were like, why? And he's like, I'll tell you guys the story later. And we kept badgering him. And he was like, let's just say I have a lot of photos of me starting the video. So he just kept taking photos. So,
that's devastating.
Yeah. But the nice thing about shooting this way is pickups are very quick. I made Angela and Mark reshoot a scene like maybe 7 times, and they hated me for it. But it was like, just go in your bedroom and shoot. It's fine. It's like one setup. You know, it's not a whole.
And I could shoot like all of this filler content. I'd be like, okay, give me like 12 tasks to do on camera, and I would just go do it and put it all. You know, like so we could do. It was a much quicker turnaround, which was interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
We actually have a great question about acting from Alexandra, who asks, how do you check on actors' comfort level around in-person filming without adding unnecessary pressure? Have you ever had a disappointment of wanting to cast someone who wasn't comfortable? So I assume this is related to this project a little bit, although of course you guys worked with a lot of these actors before, but in general, has that come up? Was anyone just not comfortable with remote filming or the little bit in-person filming that you did?
You know, we didn't do any in-person filming until the very last episode, and we kept everyone in cars.
Yeah.
Was there
anyone who you asked to guest star who didn't want to do remote filming, who was like, this seems like too much work and too much stress?
No. Everyone, I mean, we are like gifted with an amazing sort of like group of actors that we've all worked with and, you know, who are like family. And so I think all of them were just like, I think especially during the pandemic, I don't know if people still feel like that now. It's like, I just think people wanted to do something. Like, I think we were all like, I think we wanted to do this for our fans, but also we were doing it for our own sanity. It was just like, we need to make something. It feels like a time that artists need to make something. And we had like an outlet to make it. So I think when we were like, hey, you guys want to act with us? People were like, yep.
Yeah. I will say we did set ground rules on the shoot where people were kind of together. Like I think there were 4 people there total. Everyone was masked and had sanitizer in their car. And like, we got all on the same page before we arrived to the location. Like here, here's where I'm thinking of putting cameras. Here's what that might mean for our proximity to each other so that we could, keep the space. If like, for example, if Justin, the DP, wanted to set up a camera in my car, then I could get out of the car and go walk down the street, give him a second to put it up, then we can sanitize, get back in, so we did do a lot of thinking ahead on how we were going to do it and sort of keep all of the,
we had to shoot the last scene. We tried to shoot it 3 to 5 times. It took us like 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. The first time we had it scheduled, the protests broke out and it just like wasn't safe.
And we had curfews. Yeah. So
we had curfews. Mm-hmm. And then second time we tried to shoot it. We got kicked out of the place we were shooting. It just kept happening where we were like, are we ever going to finish this? It was literally the last scene of the show, the last scene we shot. And it was like, it was shot maybe like 3 days before.
And then I was out of town. And so they shot Donnie first. Things. And
we have another question that I was also curious about from Monica, who asked, what kind of tripod equipment did you use for iPods? And what would you recommend for an iPad if you have any recommendations?
We're going to be disappointing here. I don't think anyone had a tripod.
No tripod. I had one. I've actually.
What did you use to stabilize? Especially
I eventually bought a selfie stick, and that helped a lot.
Well, and here's the thing with this show,
this
right?
This pop socket actually was a life changer because I would just hook it onto my computer and put it as close to the lens as possible on my computer. That's really what worked.
And the thing is, this was never shot with a tripod in the world. You know what I mean? There was never any like smooth shots because this was shot by the actual characters. So it was always okay with if someone's holding it. Sometimes people had it leaning against something, but it was like too many people and too little time to like get tripods and figure that out. We really rushed into it. There was no planning.
That's kind of been the whole theme with Binge. We just sort of do it first and think about it a second.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. I think like as a person, I tend to be like, well, but and Angela is like, I wake up and there's 40 texts from Angela of like, how do we do this? I've started 30 Google Docs, but that helps. And I think like we just jumped into it and we figured it out as we went, and it was, scrappy and quick. But I'm so proud of these episodes. Like it started off as like a little bit, I literally remember saying the line, like it's not going to be perfect. Let's just write whatever and release it just as like a thing for everyone. And then at the end of it, I'm like, I think I like these episodes more than I like the original pilot. I think it's really, I don't know. There's something about them that I'm like really,
Yeah, no, and Yuri,
you mentioned earlier that it felt more intimate in a way that was really powerful, and I totally agree. And I think a lot of that is like the very found footagey aspect. It's like a primary source document. We're not watching people in scenes. We are in the scene with them. We are on the other side of the Zoom call, and I think that there people who can use that to get lazy. Certainly, we have all probably collectively seen 1,000 lazy found footage web series, but the web series and the non-web series that really utilize that format for its power, which is getting really creative about when things appear on camera, when they don't, the times where you're only seeing part of someone's face because they're trying to like get out of the frame or things like that. Like there's so many cool new blocking things you can do in that. So it can actually be really freeing to have those restrictions and not be worried about like, is my 3-point lighting perfectly set up and all that kind of stuff.
There's a bit of like, there's, all these podcasts now that are coming out that are scripted. And we had been talking about making Binge into one with someone, but to do that, I had researched a bunch, and I know Angela likes a lot of them too. But to listen to those, they're built for audio. some better than others, and I think when we approached this, it was a similar thing of like, well, let's build this for this format. Let's not just make a show with bad footage. Like, let's make a, yeah.
So did you guys have any like lighting? Like, I'm actually working on a remote production myself, and my director keeps sending me these lighting diagrams of where I should put the light that I use for webinars to shoot something. And I'm like, I don't know what this means. Did you guys run into that, or was it just stand in front of a window and let's hope for the best?
It was so our DPs. So I just shot a commercial with our production company separate to this, and the way we shot it was we shipped gear to 5 different people. So this was like had a budget, but we shipped gear to people, and then Justin, our DP, who did binge as well, would literally over Zoom walk them through building a camera and 4 lights and setting it up. He didn't send them a diagram. He was just like, show me with your iPhone your living room. And then he'd be like, put the camera, near the bookcase. And it looks great. And so I think we are lucky with a person who is like is I would say a genius when it comes to these kind of things.
But we didn't have any special lights except for the very last episode where Justin delivered a light to me in a plastic bag. But it was basically like, okay, put a scarf over that. Do you have a different color scarf? Yeah. Put a different color scarf over that.
Yeah. And then the end when we shot it for real and had real lights. But yeah.
So Yuri, can you talk a little bit about directing via Zoom, and Angela, maybe as a response, what was it like being directed over Zoom? Were there things that came up that wouldn't have ordinarily? What was hard? What was maybe nice?
Yeah, I think the hardest is always staging, because you're just like, I can't wrap my head around where you are in your house, and it'd be like, like I feel like we would spend an hour just being like, my left, that kind of thing was the most, I think, irritating. I think, again, it goes back to us having worked together a lot with all these actors, and I trust them and they trust me, and I think everyone sort of understands what we're doing. So to me, I have the luck of working with amazing actors, so I just have to like adjust. Like, to me, I don't like if someone's doing something great, I'm not going to give them 1,000 notes. Like, it was just literally like a little bit this way, a little bit that way. Angela and I have a second hand at this point. And I mean, like Angela and Daniela, for example, can knock out scenes with 0 direction, and it could be an amazing scene because they have this natural chemistry. Ryan, who plays the therapist, brought so much of his own stuff in the original pilot too. Yeah. But again, I feel like I'm more of like a conductor adjusting lightly than so for me, it was generally the same, because you're still seeing their faces, you're still hearing the dialogue. I think the staging thing is was the most complex, irritating thing,
As an actor, it's a little bit freeing, because a lot of this stuff, and there's a lot of me alone in the show, basically doing like etudes, as an actor might say. And it was pretty freeing because, when you're on set, you're aware of time. You're aware that everyone has spent so much time setting up so that you can do this performance. And when I'm the one doing the full setup and it's on my own time, I can just do as many takes as I want until I feel like I like something. Or I can just like do 3 totally different things, send it to Yuri, he can watch it, and he can sort of say, okay, do a little more of this, a little more of that. And so there's a little bit of, I don't really feel pressure around the HLG crew because we know each other so well. But on some set, you want to get it right for everyone who's working so hard around you. But when you're by yourself, I don't know, you don't really have to get it right. And that's kind of nice.
I know that for me, there was one scene that I was shooting, and it was like just me. It was a conversation with Angela, but for some reason we shot it separately. And I remember I swear I did like 40 takes just by myself. And I'm like, what am I doing? This is a 3-second scene. So for me, it was harder to direct myself without someone in the room being like, stop, you're fine. But yeah, I agree with the sentiment. Yeah.
So can you guys talk a little bit about the budget? If you're comfortable just revealing the number, that would be awesome. Otherwise, what were some budget hacks so that you kind of kept things relatively low budget, but still maintained the overall quality? You've talked about some of it, but if you could talk more specifically on like the money side, I'd love that.
I think the one thing to clarify here is that like we made it for nothing, but it's not nothing because like we own stuff, right? Like, so HLG has some lights and has like, so when Justin went to shoot the last scene, like that would have cost money if not for the fact that we have a camera, but it wasn't an expensive camera. It's like, look, you could rent that gear probably for a few $100s, what we used in the last scene. Other than that, we had a drone, which again, we own the drone.
we didn't spend any dollars.
We didn't actually spend money. Yeah.
No money. Yeah. But
people's time.
But people's time is
Angela bought
all
a new
sweat equity, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Like everyone's
that's common in indie film anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the pilot, the original pilot, I think we made that for under $3,000. But the same thing is like sweat equity, gear that HLG owns, insurance that HLG owns, you know, so that gives us a little bit of a head start there.
Yeah. And again, it's like, I think if you tack on gear, probably would, for this, I think very little. It'd be a few $100s maybe. For the pilot, I think it would maybe be like a couple thousand.
You know what? I shouldn't say it was nothing because I had to buy a new computer and a new cell phone.
Well,
so I spent like $2,000 on this.
Yeah. But that's also because you had a computer from the 90s.
Yeah, I know. My computer was like lighting on fire every time to turn it on. So it was about time.
Yeah.
Sure. And also, though, a lot of the stuff that you guys shot was just a phone, using audio from a phone.
Yeah.
Using free things, probably like Google Drive and Dropbox to send footage back and forth. And also like the barter system is real and alive in the indie film community. Probably someone you know has a nice camera if you don't want to use an iPhone, or has a nicer iPhone than you know, somebody who recently upgraded, who's on like a payment plan, you know, they didn't buy it outright, but they'd be willing to, you know, sanitize it and hand it over for a couple of hours. Like, I think people are so afraid of asking for help, not just from like fellow creators, but also just from like people in their lives, when in actuality, when people ask me for random little things like, hey, do you have a light? Or hey, do you have a t-shirt in this color? I'm delighted to help because I get to be a part of this project now, even if I didn't know about it before. So, you know, the generosity of human beings is really where a lot of the low budget hacks come from, and reminding yourself that you are not a burden for asking. The worst they can say is no, thank you. Or I don't have it.
Right. And we wrote for what we had. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's like the thing that I've been talking about since we started, like as filmmakers, digital filmmakers, it's like you look at what you have and then you write the story around that. Sometimes we would go like in our other projects, we might like shoot high and then sometimes get what we need. But I think, you know, for the pilot, we were like, okay, we can get these locations, we can get this and this, and then let's write around that. And same with this, like we have gear, so we knew we could do that final scene, but that final scene didn't have to be shot the way it was shot. It was just like part of the story that we wrote. So
Andrew DP or somebody had the drone already. So like, hey, why not use a really cool trick shot? Like sometimes you end up having things that make a really cool impression. Sometimes it's just a prop, you know, you find out that you just have something in your house that's really unique, or, you know, you have a window that's a perfect shape for a really cool shot. You know, it doesn't always have to be equipment based. Like sometimes it's just setting, you know.
And and I will say, like Dashiell, our editor, I mean, the amount of money he's worth is a lot of money. Well, you know, for his incredible work, right? Yeah. So
there's so much
time get to know
and
your
Dash
friends
is an owner of the company
really well. And when everyone has, and I'm sure, indie filmmakers find this all the time, but when you're almost like a socialistic independent filmmaking circle, everyone has ownership and it's everyone's project. And so it helps with the, you know.
Right. It's not asking for a favor if it's someone who's a producer on the project or whatever. And I think as far as asking for favors, I mean, that's like, you know, we did it our entire career, especially in the beginning. And like the idea for us was like, when we do have a job, we will hire those people that helped us, because like I really want to make sure they're repaid. And whenever they ask us for favors, we lend gear and whatever we can do. And I think like to me, we're a community helping each other constantly. I'm not competing with anyone. So I think asking is
generosity around you, you know?
Yeah.
Cool. So I have one question logistically, and then I want to back up again to talk about something else before we get to the end. But quickly, Matthew asked about editing. So what was the editing process? I remember seeing one of your after episode Q&As where you were all delirious. So I'd love to hear about the deliriousness of editing this mid-pandemic.
It was sort of interesting. Me and Dash me and Dash have known each other since high school, and he co-owns a company with me and Justin and my brother. And so like, you know, we have a shorthand that like, so he does all the first passes generally of the things. And then we would screen share over Zoom, which is like, was a unique experience, but actually surprisingly awesome. Cause I was in his computer, right? So I was like, could you move the clip over? I could see the whole thing. So that worked pretty well. And then we would call, like, once we had a cut that we liked, we'd be like, Angela, Justin, Daniela, come jump on the call and check it out. So it worked like really well, shockingly. Yeah.
What we didn't anticipate the first round was that because we had a ton of different sources, the export, and this is where I don't know the tech of this that well, but Justin and Dash found that the export took like 300 times longer than we expected, and they were up to like 5 a.m. the night before.
They problem solved it eventually, and I forget exactly what it is.
I can't remember what it was, but
I think it is the different formats and different ways of shooting was messing it up.
So they had to troubleshoot how to sort of get the footage more in line.
And we had some issues with like getting, for like, all the actors had to send their own through Dropbox, and mostly that, I think Angela had the hardest time.
I had the hardest time with it because my Wi-Fi just like didn't want to. Sometimes it would take like 3 hours to send 2 minutes, and so that was the most taxing part. Was my relationship with the internet was really strained. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. So I want to take a step back because I have 2 more topics that I would love to talk to you guys about because you're both uniquely suited for them. So Angela, I would love to talk to you about your Saturday support streams and maybe more broadly, the audience and community building you have done so truly exquisitely since you started this project. So can you talk about what that is and what that process has been like for you?
Yeah. Just kind of like with everything with Binge, it's sort of just been like trying things and trying to figure them out and throwing things at the wall and seeing what kind of works. When we first put the show out, the pilot out like 3 or so years ago, when we got the response, we got Yuri and the team and I started to do some like Q&A because I was getting a lot of questions just about my journey and in recovery. And so we did a couple of different Q&A videos. And that kind of expanded when we did our crowdfunding campaign. I did an interview series where I interviewed other people in different stages of their recovery. Because, the show is very in your face, dark comedy. The character is, can be pretty tough to love at times. That we always really wanted to supplement it with some like really sort of like earnest, heartfelt support. And then especially with these new pandemic episodes, we just really felt like we just wanted to sort of be there a little bit more with them. And so I just started doing these, and I've done them usually once a week. I had to miss this past week because I was traveling again. And so, doing my best to stay on top of it as much as I can in the craziness of the world right now. But yeah, just doing a weekly support where I just go live on HLG's YouTube and basically just like hang out and answer questions about recovery and support. And it's been pretty cool. There's a pretty solid group of regulars who kind of come in and, touch base. And it's a little, I'm not a therapist. I do lead a support group through Project Teal, which is an eating disorder organization. So I have a little bit of training, but I like to just sort of, remind people that like, this isn't like a health thing. It's not a therapy thing. It's just like hanging out, chatting, getting some support. So it's been a nice way to connect with the audience and sort of try and take what we're doing on screen and have a little bit more of a, because the show to us, we were never interested in making like an after school special, like it's gonna get better. Like that's just not what we're interested in. But in the real world, in terms of like personal connection, I really do believe that. And it does get better and you can do it. So we wanted to like kind of have the 2 streams of approach to the subject matter. So that's sort of been that.
Yeah, and I think that something that is important to
take away from there, like obviously eating disorder and recovery is very personal to you, but at the end of the day, the best way to audience build is to be genuinely interested in your audience and creating a community rather than just spamming people with a link and then disappearing. Like you can't audience build cynically because it's always going to come across cynically and everyone's going to know that you're a phony. So the best way to not be a phony is to don't be a phony.
And we have the best audience. Like they make it very easy for us. They, you know, like the comments, we'll put something out and then like within 5 minutes we'll have like 100 comments and they're all just like so sweet and awesome and smart and interesting people. So it's yeah, we want to interact with them.
With the new episodes, we also did this thing that was super fun where we did live premieres on YouTube. And so our audience could all get there at the same time and like be chatting while watching it. And that was so
highly
fun.
Recommend. Yes.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
It was really,
especially
really
when
fun.
we can't premiere in person.
Now that's definitely a great way. I mean, the live chat that we're doing right now has been very, very cool, and watching everyone chat and network in the comments. So Yuri, my question for you. So you've worked in digital short form content for almost 15 years at this point. Yeah. So can you talk about the industry as it stands now? And if you really want to start some shit, what your thoughts on Quibi are, or Quibi, or however the hell you pronounce it?
This will be a long, depressing.
Yeah.
No, I think that at some point the industry that I was in, which is digital, and like, you know, as a brief background to people who don't know who I am, like we made a web series in 2006 that was just like accidentally one of the first series. It was called Break a Leg. And it sort of, we were kids, but it like put us, you know, got us all this press coverage for us because it was one of the first like scripted shows on YouTube, which had just come out. So we got a bunch of attention, got a bunch of jobs from that, did like a lot of commercials. So that kind of propelled our career. And then we sort of inhabited this area for a while where we were like the people that these big digital places like Full Screen or Maker Studios or whatever would go to make stuff because we can make high quality things at budgets that were not TV budgets. And then a lot of those companies decided to, instead of like Maker Studios had 2 giant warehouses with 1,000+ employees. And you would walk in and you'd be like, what does everyone do here? I don't understand what people do here. And then shockingly, they all closed, you know, and so that industry just collapsed. So the space that we inhabited where we were like professionals collapsed. And then so the things, then it was like Hulu and Netflix, and those people aren't really digital. I mean, they're digital in the sense that they're online, but they're not the same as what we were doing, you know, 5 years ago. So I've had to, and my company's had to we've had to like find our path because it's, I mean, and this is true with digital in general. Every year it changes like what everyone's doing and things like that. But, you know, now we have to make the jump to television and Netflix and things like that because that's what there is. There's no one really making that indie content anymore that we were making. Like people are trying, like people independently are, but no one's really funding it. The only maybe option is doing branded stuff, which is actually how we started too. So like a brand, you know, brand can fund a good series if they're willing and give you good money for it and be pretty open with the creative. And like some of the coolest things we've done were like brand funded. So, so anyway, so this long rant aside, like I think I don't know if it'll come back the way it was. I think probably it's in some capacity because I think people are always interested in that, like especially now with the pandemic, frankly, like you can't make gigantic big budget things all the time. So people like us, I think, become a value. That said, like Quibi's, here's the super annoying thing with Quibi, and maybe this summarizes what I'm trying to get to, is like there was a group of people from 2005 till now who were successfully making content and making good stuff and interesting stuff and know all the tricks, know how, you know, YouTube works, know how to interact with the audience, knows all this stuff. And then when it collapsed, none of these places take our professionalism into account. So Quibi would launched, and we were like, you know, I've had people who had meetings with them who was like, what you're doing, you're making a lot of mistakes that we all knew about and did 10 years ago. And Quibi would be like, no one's ever done this before. And I'm like, no, I assure you they have. And they failed, you know. And so
never made a web series doesn't mean that web series and short form compelling storytelling didn't exist before you.
Right. Short form content online, like that was their original pitch. Like, what are you doing? And you know, things like Spielberg is going to make a show that launches out that you can only watch after midnight. Like, it's cute, but nobody cares. Like, maybe Spielberg, but I mean, maybe for fan of Spielberg, but obviously nobody cares, you know? So if they had come to us, if they had come to people like me, then there's a bunch of us, I think they would have done better.
We went to them, so
we did go to them, and they said no, and they were very nice people. And
it's
all the executives are great.
Personal.
I just think that TV showed up into our industry and was like, oh, we got it, we understand, and then crushed it on one hand, and then now there's all these places that are having troubles because they're, they think that they're professionals, but they don't know this genre. They don't know how to make things exactly here.
Can you think of like one or two
good examples of the mistakes that, the indie folks learned in 2006 that it seems like Hollywood is relearning now? Can you give just a couple of examples of like, just don't do this and it gets way easier for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few things. Like, I'm not a big believer of short form scripted content, like 3-4 minute episodes. I don't really think people want to like sit down and watch 4 minutes of something. Like, I just don't. I think it's a particular kind of content that's successful, and that's like, TikTok and things like those things are successful on your phone.
Or comedy sketches, stuff like that.
Yeah,
comedy sketches, right? A quick sketch. Yeah. But trying to make a show and it's like 10 minutes and it's like, well, why? Like, why do people like? Netflix is doing great, so I don't think people are like, God, this show's great, but I wish it was 10 minutes. Like, I love Dark, but I wish Dark was 7-minute episodes. It's just like nobody. So people love stories, and if it's a good story, you're never like, I wish it was shorter. You want a good story, and so I think Quibi's bet that like. So to me, that was foolish, and that's been, by the way, my struggle since we started in 2006 till now. We always made longer content. People always fought with us. It always inevitably went longer, and then there was like this rebound where people would be like, no, just make 2-minute videos, and then the same thing. Like, I'm not saying the 2-minute videos don't work. I'm just saying they're a particular style of video. They're not a TV show. Mm-hmm. Binge in 2 minutes would not be an interesting show. So that's
also, the industry just seems to chase itself, right? Everything's huge budget, huge name, huge genre, huge production value. Yeah. And that's fun sometimes, but you don't want to eat a huge steak every single meal of your life, and there, I think niche shows like Binge that you can make for very little money can draw in specific communities, and rather than sort of like pandering to these big things, if you form really authentic relationships with specific audiences, I think then you are in communication with your audience, and then you have relationship, and it's less about, you can feel it when you're watching a show that you feel pandered to. You're like, okay, this is, I see what you're doing.
Well, I think that's exactly my other thing was that it's like, there's a lot of like starfuckery thing, like Full Screen and Maker Studios would be like, we're going to take the biggest makeup artist on YouTube who has, 10 million subscribers, and we're going to put her into a scripted series about, and it's just like, what are you talking about? They're not I don't understand. Or you can make a really good show that's like edgy and interesting, that isn't just like a bad version of a television show. And that's sort of the main point is like, people are afraid to make Binge, but like, it would have, and I'm obviously, this is going to sound arrogant here, but if Quibi had made Binge, I think it would have been successful for them, because Binge is not a thing you could get on television. You can get all the shows that Quibi, is producing on television, just in a bigger, longer capacity. So why sign up for a service you've never heard of before?
But Quibi, if you want to pay us, we'll take your money.
Of course, I'm not saying I will sell out in a second. Just to
Absolutely, we're so poor.
But I think like the biggest risk for these smaller companies is to not take risks. They want to be like TV shows. They want to be like, and Jeffrey Katzenberg obviously has the money to do these things. But I still think like, if he had went for something that was like dark and interesting and bizarre and weird, if Charlie Kaufman made something for him, if they had committed to being like, like there's Netflix and there's Hulu and you've never heard of us, and a regular person does not care who the fuck Jeffrey Katzenberg is. If they knew like, hey, this Quibi is providing content that you are not seeing on television. It's different, it's edgier, it's exploring things that you don't see explored. Then I think people will be like, oh, cool, I want to see that. But why are you making like B-level TV that's shorter? Like what's the sell there, So
yeah. I think that a lot of old traditional media that's trying to get into new media is trying to recapture the millions of live viewers at a time that TV used to get. But TV used to get millions of live viewers at a time because there were 4 channels.
Yeah.
There's so many more options these days. So like, audiences that are smaller are, as long as there is an audience, you can do something with that. You can get momentum. You can raise $45,000 in a crowdfunding campaign and make 4 incredible episodes for very little money. You know, even without the barter system, the full budget, I imagine, would still not be nearly as high as, you know, a spectacle Marvel movie. And that doesn't mean it's inherently worse. Storytelling, good storytelling shines through, and you don't need a famous person's name for that to be true. And neither does the audience anymore. The audience loves its famous people, but they have their time and place. Like now it's time to show us stories that we haven't seen before.
Well, if Fleabag was pitched with now to Quibi, they would have passed. I mean, easily. Most places would have, right? And Fleabag had 14 Emmys, whatever, like a bunch of nominations. It's an amazing show, but it's super cheap, and it's just a really great story by really great people who none of us really know. And so it's like, but that's so rare. Like that's
and it's also British too. Like this is a bigger conversation, but both Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Michaela, God, what is her last name? She's a genius. Chewing Gum, I May Destroy You. They're playwrights, and they adapted their plays to very small, brilliant shows that then got, you know, eventually reached American markets, and we're like, oh my God, because they're brilliant women, and they're telling brilliant, specific, smart shows, and it's not about, we didn't know who they were. And people responded to how incredible the content was.
But there's a reason we're talking. There's 5 shows like this that we can talk about, right? Like there's just, because it's like we can keep learning this lesson over and over again, but there's going to be constantly these execs who are like, but we're going to have Spielberg make a show that's only out after midnight, because that's the thing that's going to get people to sign up. It just, you know.
Yeah. All right. So this was my own fault for starting this in the last 8 minutes of our conversation. So
sorry.
In order to, you think you're ranting, but this is what
we turned this into our therapy session. So thank you.
This is our Wednesday support session, to be honest, for all the indie filmmakers who are like, what's happening?
Someone listen to us.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm writing a one-man show about my complaints about Quibi.
But at the end, it's like your resume is projected behind you, and you're like, Jeffrey Katzenberg, please call me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tomorrow. You need a writer over there. Yeah.
Okay. To not take up too much more of your guys' time, do you guys have any final words of wisdom, places where we can support you? Obviously, all of the apps are scrolling underneath us, but anything else that our audience should know before you guys head off?
You know, the very honest thing is that the last 3 episodes I love so much, but for some reason we just haven't been able to get them out there as well as the first one. So if you guys like them and know people who would want to write about them or pass them on, please, because I don't even care. You know, we're not at this point, we've pitched to TV. I don't know if anyone's buying. So, but I just want people to watch it. I'm just proud of it. So if people are like, oh, I know someone who would love this, you know, then that'd be great. And the other thing I was going to say is, if you guys have any questions for us, feel free to email or tweet at us or whatever. It doesn't, you know, I always like helping people who are, we were helped along the way and still are. So ask away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And for those of you, I've seen a lot of crowdfunding questions in the comments. Lucky for you guys, Seed&Spark is a crowdfunding platform. So basically all of our previous Lunch and Learn sessions in some way deal with crowdfunding, either vaguely or explicitly. So definitely check out our previous Lunch and Learns. But before I do our final shout outs of what's coming next, thank you so much, Angela and Yuri. It was so lovely chatting with you guys. Thank you
for having us. And thanks for all of your support of this show over all these years.
Yeah,
you are amazing. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, for real.
You are like the
OG. Hey, listen, you make great stuff. You tell great stories. It doesn't matter if I didn't know who either of you were beforehand. I am a lifetime fan. So thanks so much, guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So for everyone else who wants to hear more from Seed&Spark, thank you so much for tuning in. That was an awesome conversation. Your questions were awesome. And if you want to keep this awesome train going, well, lucky you. On Friday, we've got another Creative Sustainability Summit coming up with Lisa Cunningham, where the event is called the Remix to Reinvention. It'll be at 1 p.m. Pacific time this Friday. And Lisa will be talking about how professional and personal growth are linked, and how having the courage to remix your life will lead you to your purpose and often your greatest fulfillment. So from what I hear, it's an incredibly inspirational and motivating thought. And I can't think of a better series of emotions to go into the weekend with. And then next Wednesday, for another Wednesday support stream, one of our Lunch and Learns, we've got another great Lunch and Learn again at 1 p.m. Pacific time, where I, once again, will be joined by composers Taylor Blake and Alexandra Kalinowski as they discuss the roles of music composers in cinema and beyond. So if you're curious about the music in movies, whether it's as a musician yourself or as a filmmaker who, like me, has absolutely no vocabulary for what to tell a composer on your short, just it should be pluckier, but no guitars, maybe guitars. I don't know. What do you think should go here? So if you want to learn how to actually talk to composers, definitely stop by next week. And also, if you're able, we would love your support at Seed&Spark to continue bringing you these awesome events to you for free. Check out the link in both the video description and in the comments to contribute what you can if you found today's workshop valuable. Because, you know, we're also kind of scrappy. We're also doing this from our home, and we would love to keep bringing this to you. So if you can pay what you can to show your support for the awesome stuff that we're doing here, we would really appreciate it. And in the meantime, like Yuri and Angela said, you can always reach out to Seed&Spark or to me personally for any follow-up questions you have for the sessions or in general, and hopefully we'll be able to point you in the right direction. So thanks again for spending your lunchtime with me or your 4 to 5 p.m. hour with me, and we will see you guys soon.